Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So first, let's give a shout out, shall we, to all the election workers. They were working sometimes under dangerous, scary circumstances. Let's also give a shout out to Gen Zers, young millennials who came out in droves for the Democrats last night. And then congratulations to all of us. We are literally living through a historic moment. This election is going to go down in history as one of the most rare. It will be discussed and dissected forever. It's difficult to overstate just how monumental this election was. I mean, what is happening here is so rare. There's less than a handful of midterm elections in the past that even compare. And journalist Ben Collins, he tracks extremists online. He said that he was watching message boards last night, and he described the mood of right wingers as despondent and catatonic. And it's because it became very clear that the red wave was only about the blood coming out of Donald Trump's eyes, coming from, other places, as he said about Megyn Kelly. Based on what happened last night, that may have been the death blow to Trump's political future. How can he possibly expect to win in 2024 when almost everyone he campaigned for was a loser last night, or they're still running behind the Democrat in races that are too close to call? And here's one data point I think every pundit and commentator missed. Everyone kept talking about right track, wrong track. They kept citing the fact that the vast majority of the country feels that we're on the wrong track. They wrongly assumed, though, that people blamed the Biden administration for it. They assumed that that meant that the economy, gas prices, potential war. What they didn't consider is people like me, people who believe we're on the wrong track because we have a hyper-partisan alt-right Supreme Court that's out of control. We have extremism and extremists that are out of control and being incited and encouraged by one of our major political parties. We see political violence, racially motivated violence, authoritarianism on the rise. We see women's rights being stripped away, and one party calling for the dissolution of equal rights for other groups. So even Democrats and progressives believe we're on the wrong track and we're headed in the wrong direction. But we damn well don't want to put Republicans in charge because they'll just keep heading us in the direction of 1930s Nazi Germany. Even Republican pundit Mark Thiessen called last night a disappointment for Republicans. And he said that the voters looked at everything going wrong in the country and they said, quote, no thanks to, quote, the Republican alternative. Republicans' so-called red wave turned out to be a light drizzle, basically only in the southern part of Florida where Ron DeSantis gerrymandered the hell out of the state map in order to disenfranchise Black voters. That's something no one's talking about. They're declaring Florida, oh, it's a lost cause, it's a red state. Oh, DeSantis really showed how much he's in charge and how much he's turned that state red. No, DeSantis himself, not the Republican Party, gerrymandered the map. The Republican Florida legislature drew their new district map and DeSantis threw it out. It wasn't rigged enough for him. So he literally drew a map of his own. ProPublica actually had a great piece about this, and they said that DeSantis may have broken Florida law against partisan biased redistricting. Here's what they said just last month. Here's what they wrote, quote, no Florida governor had ever pushed their own district lines before. His plan wiped away half of the state's Black-dominated congressional districts, dramatically curtailing Black voting power in America's largest swing state. And keep in mind, he wasn't just doing that for last night's midterm. This is also about giving him an edge in the 2024 presidential election. Now having said that, there's no denying he had a massive statewide win. It was very decisive. He defeated Charlie Crist by a large margin. Sorry, had to throw in a Pee-wee's Big Adventure reference. But seriously, there was one bright spot last night in Florida. The very first Gen Zer was elected to Congress. Maxwell Frost is a 25-year-old. He was a climate activist, and he was running for the seat that was left open by Democrat Val Demings, who unfortunately ran for the Senate, lost last night. So whoop, whoop for Frost. But overall, the theme of last night was clearly a direct rebuke to Trumpism, to Trump's election deniers. Crazy liars can only get you so far. And speaking of which, speaking of crazy liars, Lauren Boebert may well lose her seat in Congress. If nothing else good happened last night, that alone would make my year. She has been trailing her Democratic opponent, if I'm not mistaken, since they began tallying the votes in Colorado. I don't believe, I watched a lot of coverage last night. I don't know that she was ever ahead. It hasn't been called yet, but she is still behind. And so far, the one and only Trump congressional candidate to put a W on the board is J.D. Vance. That's pathetic. Even his race in Ohio was closer than expected. Mr. You should stay with your abusive husband because God, blah, 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 and kids. Yeah. And can we just also take a minute to appreciate the Oprah effect in Pennsylvania and the awesome win that John Fetterman pulled off against Mr. Crudité, Dr. Oz? Also in Pennsylvania, good news there, Summer Lee is the first Black Pennsylvania woman to be elected to Congress. Lee is a progressive also, so even better. A corporate Democrat group and a pro-Israel group actually sent money to her Republican challenger to try to prevent her from winning. But tell me again how corporate Democrats don't play games, how they don't try to undermine the populist wing of their party. As for Georgia, that was a nail biter all night. If you guys watched, you know what I mean. Herschel Walker was up for far too long. Warnock finally gained a slight lead late in the evening, but that's headed to a runoff in the first week of December because neither one of them secured more than 50% of the vote. Now, here's the question. What happens to the voters who cast a ballot for Chase Oliver? He was the libertarian in that race. Traditional thinking would indicate that libertarians align more with Republicans. I would posit, though, that if those voters truly aligned with Republicans, they would have voted for Walker, right? That race was predicted to be razor thin. For some reason, they weren't comfortable with Walker or Warnock. And we also know one thing about libertarians is at their core, they don't like government overreach. They don't like government control. They don't like government having a say in Americans' lives. So they're less likely to vote for someone who wants to take away women's rights. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they're going to vote for a Democrat. So my guess is that a lot of them will end up abstaining from voting. So it just becomes a matter of who's going to turn out their base. And as of this afternoon, right before I began recording, Republicans had a lead in the Senate. So they were holding 48 seats compared to Democrats' 46, but there's still races up in the air. So depending on what happens with the outstanding races, Democrats could have the edge and enthusiasm when it comes time to vote in that Georgia runoff. Even in the governor's races last night, Trump's election deniers failed miserably. Doug Mastriano, Tudor Dixon, who thinks that it's a blessing for a 14-year-old to be raped and end up pregnant with her rapist baby. Carrie Lake is still running behind Katie Hobbs in Arizona, but Hobbs' lead actually shrunk. But you know who did win last night? What won big last night is women and the right to control our own bodies. Numerous states had constitutional amendments. They had other legislation on the ballot asking voters, do you want to uphold or do you want to abolish a woman's right to choose? And so far, every single state has voted to allow women freedom over their own bodies and their own destiny. Even in Kentucky, ruby red Kentucky. And abortion, they're saying, was the top concern cited in exit polls. You know why? Because unlike a child, inflation isn't going to last for 18 years. And here's one thing I'd love to know, which I wish exit polls would ask. How much did the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband play a role in voters' decision? I would venture a guess that it was the impetus for some Democrats getting off the couch and voting. I would also like to think that there are honorable, decent conservatives in this country who looked at what happened and they looked at the tweets by Donald Trump Jr. They looked at others who were mocking the attack and they said, I'm out. I can't stick with a party that has lost all sense of decency and humanity. So it'll be interesting to see how many Republicans crossed over and voted for Democrats. We'll know in the coming days, but there's still a lot on the line, guys. And here's the thing. Here's what I want everyone to take away. Even if Republicans win, there's a silver lining to this. It might actually help Democrats in 2024. Here's why. If Republicans take control of the Senate and the House, and they do nothing about inflation, they do nothing about high gas prices, they do nothing to help average Americans, and they do what they keep telling everybody they're going to do, which is to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, harm average people while giving more tax breaks, re-upping their tax breaks from 2017 for the wealthy and for corporations. How is that going to play out in 2024? It's going to be kind of hard for them to make the case that, oh yeah, now you need to give us the presidency too. So anyway, guys, I will keep you posted on everything. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care, and I'll talk with you soon.